Let's look at something completely different now. This clip was sent to me by about a dozen of you. Yesterday, in another attack on DEI programs, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and in an attack on wokeness, etc., right-wing organizer, I guess I would call him, Charlie Kirk, said that when he gets on an airplane and he sees a black pilot, folks, he says he sees a black pilot, he's worried about whether the pilot is actually qualified. Now, this comes after Charlie Kirk questioned the worth of Martin Luther King Day. Let's take a listen to it and then let's discuss.
And that's why I think this United story and the DEI story hits so hard, because we've all been in the back of a plane when the turbulence hits, or when you're flying through a storm and you're like, I'm so glad I saw the guy with the right stuff and the square jaw get into the cockpit before we took off. And I feel better now thinking about that.
No, I mean, like, you want to go thought crime? Like, I'm sorry, if I see a black pilot, I'm going to be like, boy, I hope he's qualified.
Well, that's the you wouldn't have done that. You wouldn't have. You wouldn't have done that before.
That's not an immediate.
No, you wouldn't have done that before.
That's not who I am. That's not what I believe.
It is the reality.
It actually sounds like it is. This is the movement that he has inspired. Now, I've heard similar stuff about female pilots, and often it starts with, I'm sorry, but. When you hear I'm sorry, but, it's very often something horribly sexist, racist, or xenophobic that's coming. Now, there's a couple different aspects to this. The reality is that there is a long history of excellence in flight among Black Americans. You look up the history of chief pilots at airlines. It feels stupid to even do this part of the story, because it's almost like we're arguing the facts, and this is actually about ideology. This isn't really he's obviously wrong on the facts. Now, I hate to tell Charlie and maybe his cohorts here who feel the same way. Because of the pilot shortages that have been experienced by airlines, the standards have dropped in general. It's not about race. It's not about gender. It's not about affirmative action. The pilot shortage, which has been driven by factors including retirement and attrition, and also growth in air travel, meaning there are more flights for which pilots are needed, it's been a strain on the aviation industry. And so there have been all sorts of waivers and exemptions issued by major airlines, as well as regional airlines, to try to bring pilots up sooner than previously they might have been able to. Now, I don't want to get specific about flight hours, because oftentimes the flight hour requirement isn't changing on paper, but there are waivers and accelerations and different things that can be finagled and maneuvered. College degrees at one point were you got to have a college degree. It's still advantageous, but there's more flexibility on college degrees as well when it comes to airline pilots. So there is a real story if you want to have the conversation about the ways in which the pilot shortage has affected aviation. But this, I see a black pilot and I worry stuff, is really the worst of the brain rot. Now, I don't know why I feel it necessary to mention this. I don't think it's out of line, and this is not what Charlie Kirk is doing. I don't think it's out of line to have a serious conversation about how so-called wokeness and DEI programs, which did so much good and were well-intentioned in their origins, can go too far or can go wrong. And I think examples of this include the disastrous congressional hearing in which 3 college presidents all refused to say, you can't call for the genocide of Jews on campus, right? We can find ways, and this often happens with worthwhile movements. The origins and the catalysts for what the right describes as wokeness, for what are often called diversity, equity, and inclusion programs, it was a great origin story. It has accomplished important things when it comes to furthering gender equality and fixing real issues that existed in this country. And also, it's a disappointing thing that very often a sliver of the proponents of some of these movements, they go too far and things get wacky. Charlie Kirk saying, I worry whether my black pilot is qualified, is very much outside the bounds of what we're talking about here. So disgusting stuff, not super surprising stuff from Charlie Kirk.